What if the most dangerous thing an empire could do was win? Imagine an army returning home after another spectacular victory. The enemy has been crushed. Another city has fallen. Another piece of territory has been added to the map. The soldiers are celebrated as heroes. The ruler looks more powerful than ever. But while the flags are still flying over the battlefield, something almost nobody notices is happening somewhere else. Treasurers are counting empty chests. Shipyards are demanding more money. Thousands of soldiers need to be paid. Fortresses need to be built. Roads need to be repaired. And on a map hundreds of miles away, another enemy is already preparing for the next war. The empire has won, and somehow it is becoming weaker. This sounds like a contradiction, but history has produced it again and again. Spain became one of the most powerful states on earth. Napoleon conquered much of continental Europe. Britain built an empire that stretched across the globe. The Soviet Union became one of the two military superpowers of the 20th century. Different centuries, different governments, different armies. Yet beneath their differences was a dangerous problem. The cost of maintaining power can eventually grow faster than the power itself. And that is the story of the empire that won too many wars. To understand the trap, we first need to abandon one of the simplest ideas in military history. We often imagine power as something you can see. More soldiers, more ships, more territory, more weapons, more victories. But great power competition doesn't work that way. Power is relative. An empire can remain enormous and still be declining if its rivals are growing faster. And every military victory creates a strange problem. Victory rarely ends a strategic commitment. It creates one. Capture a fortress, and now you have to defend it. Conquer a province, and now you have to administer it. Control a trade route, and now you have to protect it. Defeat an enemy, and now his neighbors may become frightened enough to join forces against you. The map gets bigger. So does the bill. And one of history's earliest warnings came from the Spanish Habsburgs. In the 16th century, Spain appeared almost unstoppable. Its monarchs controlled territories across Europe and possessed an enormous overseas empire. American silver flowed into the Spanish world in extraordinary quantities. To an observer, this looked like the perfect foundation for permanent greatness. But Spain's ambitions were expensive. The Habsburg monarchy was fighting on multiple fronts and trying to defend interests scattered across Europe and beyond. Armies needed to be paid. Troops needed supplies. Forts needed garrisons. Navies needed ships. And wars consumed money at a frightening speed. The problem wasn't that Spain had no resources. The problem was that its strategic commitments could consume resources faster than they could be replenished. This is one of the great misunderstandings about imperial wealth. Having treasure does not automatically make an economy productive. Silver can finance a war, but it cannot magically create an efficient tax system, productive industries, secure trade networks, or an unlimited supply of soldiers. Spain could win battles and still accumulate financial problems. And that created a dangerous cycle. More threats required more military spending. More military spending required more revenue. More revenue required greater taxation and borrowing. And eventually, the empire found itself spending enormous resources simply to remain in the position its previous victories had created. Spain had not become powerless. The world around it was changing. Other powers were learning. Other economies were growing. Other states were becoming better at financing war. The first lesson was already visible. An empire does not need to become weak for its rivals to overtake it. Sometimes it only needs to stop growing while everyone else catches up. More than 2 centuries later, another empire would push this idea to an extraordinary extreme. Napoleon's France. At the beginning of the 19th century, Napoleon seemed to possess the ultimate military formula. His armies moved rapidly. His commanders struck at the right moment. Enemy coalitions were repeatedly defeated. Austerlitz became legendary. Prussia collapsed with astonishing speed. French influence spread across Europe. On the map, France looked unstoppable. But look at the same map differently. Every victory created another problem. More territory meant more troops. More troops meant more supplies. More occupied territory meant more resistance. And every frightened European power had a reason to keep fighting. Napoleon wasn't simply fighting individual countries anymore. He was increasingly fighting a system of enemies. Then came Spain. French forces became trapped in a brutal conflict against resistance that refused to disappear. And then came the decision that would expose the limits of Napoleon's system: Russia. In 1812, Napoleon marched into the vast Russian Empire with an enormous army. At first, the scale of the invasion seemed to confirm his power, but Russia offered Napoleon an enemy that could retreat faster than France could destroy it. Distance became a weapon. The roads stretched farther. The supplies became harder to maintain. The army moved deeper into a country whose scale was almost impossible to control. Moscow was reached. But Moscow was not victory. Napoleon had won battles. He had marched farther. He had conquered more. And yet his strategic position was collapsing. The retreat turned the previous victories into a nightmare. The army that had once seemed invincible was devastated. And the lesson was brutal. An army can be powerful enough to conquer territory, but not powerful enough to sustain the empire that conquest creates. But perhaps the most fascinating example came from Britain. For centuries, Britain built an extraordinary system of global power. Its navy protected trade routes. Its merchants connected distant markets. Its colonies supplied resources and strategic bases. Its military presence stretched across oceans. The empire was enormous, and for a long time, Britain could afford it. But maintaining global supremacy required something more than winning battles. It required staying ahead economically and industrially. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. Britain did not simply wake up one morning and become weak. Instead, competitors grew. The United States became an industrial giant. Germany transformed into a formidable industrial and military power. Japan emerged as a major Asian power. The balance was changing. Britain could still possess a powerful navy while becoming less dominant relative to the countries around it. Then came the World Wars. Britain survived. It even emerged victorious from both. But victory came with enormous costs. The First World War consumed vast financial resources. The Second World War demanded an even greater mobilization of the economy. Britain won, but the international balance had changed dramatically. The United States had become the dominant economic and financial power of the Western world. The British Empire survived the war, but Britain could no longer sustain the same global position indefinitely. And that is one of the strangest facts about imperial decline. You can win the war and still lose the world that existed before it. Then, in the 20th century, another superpower demonstrated the same danger from a completely different ideological direction: the Soviet Union. By the middle of the Cold War, the Soviet Union possessed extraordinary military power. It had nuclear weapons, a massive army, a huge industrial base, allied governments across Eastern Europe. Global influence. It was one half of a bipolar world. From the outside, this looked like the definition of strength. But superpower competition has a hidden cost. Military power must be maintained every year. Weapons become obsolete. Factories must be upgraded. Scientists must be funded. Armies must be supplied. Strategic forces must be modernized, and global commitments must be supported. The Soviet Union also faced economic and political problems that went far beyond military spending. Its intervention in Afghanistan did not single-handedly destroy the Soviet system, but it became another burden inside a system already under pressure. The important point is not that the Soviet Union simply spent itself into collapse. History is rarely that simple. The point is that military power could not compensate indefinitely for deeper economic and structural weaknesses. A superpower could possess thousands of nuclear weapons and still struggle to sustain the system underneath them. And eventually, the Soviet Union disappeared. Not because someone captured Moscow with an army, but because the political and economic system supporting Soviet power could no longer hold together. So what connects Spain, Napoleon, Britain, and the Soviet Union? Not one identical mistake, not one magical formula, and certainly not the idea that every empire is destined to collapse in exactly the same way. Their histories were radically different, but they reveal a recurring problem. Great powers accumulate commitments. They expand their interests. They build larger militaries. They defend more territory. They fight more distant enemies. They spend more to maintain the position created by earlier victories. And eventually, the question changes. It is no longer, can we win this war? It becomes, can we afford everything that winning this war will require us to defend afterward? That is the trap. Because the most dangerous moment for a great power may not be when its army is defeated. It may be when its army is victorious, and the map becomes too large to defend. History therefore leaves us with a disturbing paradox. Power creates responsibility. Victory creates commitments. Commitments create costs. Costs create pressure, and pressure gives rising competitors an opportunity. The empire may still look magnificent from the outside. Its flag may still fly over distant territories. Its soldiers may still possess superior weapons. Its generals may still win battles. But underneath the surface, the balance may already be changing. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Great powers rarely collapse because they suddenly become weak. More often, they decline because the world becomes too expensive for the power they have accumulated to control. The empire doesn't always die because it lost too many wars. Sometimes it wins too many of them.